Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show that prides itself on taking sources that were, well, perhaps never meant to be fully understood and turning them into intellectual shortcuts.
Yeah.
We are here to make you the most fascinating person in any room, provided, of course, that you're talking about extremely complicated sleep theory.
And today, we are definitely going to need that service more than ever.
Yeah.
We're attempting to deep dive into a document that reads less like, academic research and more like a high-wire linguistic performance.
It really does.
We are tackling the Sesquipedalian Dissoi Logoi of the Automatron.
If that title sounds intimidating, you are tracking perfectly with the source material itself. I mean, we are dealing with Sesquipedalianism,
Which is just a fancy word for
the deliberate, almost aggressive use of incredibly long and specialized vocabulary, and it's used to construct a Dissoi Logoi.
which is a classical rhetorical structure, right? Presenting opposing arguments.
Exactly. This isn't just scholarship. It's a stylistic gauntlet thrown down at the reader. It's a challenge.
And our core subject is the nature of dreams, which the text calls Wiederschinsamism.
Wiederschinsamism. I love that. The state of sleeping where everything seems to run contrary to the daylight world.
Yeah, counterclockwise against the sun. And central to this entire discussion is the Automatron.
The Automatron.
The author's term for the engine of the mind, the machine responsible for generating, organizing, and, yes, arguing about dreamkind.
It is a steep climb, and the document is surprisingly honest about it, which is almost funny. Right in the preface, the text issues a captatio benevolentiae,
A plea for goodwill.
a plea for goodwill, asking the reader to pardon the extreme length and the necessary heuristicide required to process the information.
Heuristicide. I just love that term. It's the murder of simple shortcuts.
It is.
The author's basically saying, look, if you came here looking for a 3-point bullet summary, you are going to be disappointed.
Deeply disappointed.
Because simplicity itself is the enemy of truth in this domain. It sets the tone immediately. We have to wrestle with the complexity to understand the core message.
And the message, ultimately, is about conflict. The entire document hinges on what they call antinomy.
Right. Antinomy is the central conflict. It's the philosophical battle between the waking world, which asserts pragmatic, measurable truth.
The world of facts and figures.
Exactly. And the sleeping soul, which insists on the spectrobuzzance of the imagined.
Spectrobuzzance. The vibrant, ghostly, buzzing quality of the things we conjure up in our heads. That's the high-stakes battle here.
It really is. The measurable world versus the vivid, subjective, internal world. That conflict is the Dissoi Logoi of existence that the entire text revolves around.
And to capture that conflict, the author employs this dazzling, almost dizzying three-part structure. These are three arguments that are entirely mutually exclusive.
Which forces you to constantly question what you just learned. You can't get comfortable.
Not at all. So here is our roadmap for navigating this philosophical three-ring circus. We start with the thesis of infinite chaos, where dreams are sublime meaning.
Then we pivot hard.
Very hard. To the antithesis, the brutal refutation that claims dreams are just simple neurological waste.
And finally, we land on the synthesis, which repudiates that simplicity and asserts a new, necessary complexity. It's a full ideological loop.
It's a very winding one.
So let's prepare ourselves for the initial descent into what the author terms the culturnismo stance, where complexity is, well, it's worshipped.
So section 1, and we are immediately in the deep end of the pool where the language is just thick and rich.
Oh, absolutely.
The initial thesis views the dream state, Wiederschinsamism, not as some biological inevitability, but as a profound, complicated, and highly intentional descent into infinite chaos.
The intention is the key word there. This isn't random. The nightly descent is given a name that speaks to its sheer scale, a paraphilepsy.
A paraphilepsy.
It's an obsessive love affair with the infinite. The idea is that the dreamer is obsessed with accessing the boundless nature of reality, and the dream is the vehicle that delivers that chaos.
And the language used to describe this chaos is, it's overwhelming by design. We're talking about high bomb theologia.
Braggadocious or inflated language, yeah.
And culturnismo, that supremely gilded, ornate style. But the author claims the purpose of all this overwhelming complexity is, paradoxically, simplicity. That seems like a massive contradiction.
It is. It's the first great contradiction of the document. The argument is that the complexity is a weapon. It's designed to reduce the reader, or, the conscious waking mind, to pusillanimikonia.
Pusillanimikonia. That's a marvelous term. A state of intellectual meekness.
Of insignificance, yeah.
Yeah.
The idea is that the argument is so complex, so filled with words, you'd need 3 dictionaries to parse.
You just give up, you surrender.
Exactly. You're intellectually overwhelmed and thus forced to accept the alleged univocal truth of the dream state.
And what is that truth, according to this first argument?
Well, the thesis initially claims it is nothing at all. The ornate style, the aureation, the gilded sublime language, it's a psychological tool. It's meant to dazzle you into the belief that something so richly described must hold a deep truth, even if that truth is a void.
I love how they describe the meeting of the two worlds when waking reality, the harsh rictus-wrestle,
Such a great word for that grating reality.
where meets slumber, the soft decay of mucopescence, that moment is memorialized.
It's memorialized as an epithalamium, which traditionally is a ceremonial song for a bridal chamber, a wedding song.
Right.
But here it's a ceremonial song to confusion, celebrating the forced contradictory union of harsh reality and the soft decaying state of being asleep. The text treats this confusion as a sublime achievement.
Okay, let's turn our attention to the mechanical star of the show, the Automatron. In this first argument, this engine of the mind is treated with what? Genuine reverence.
Absolutely. It receives a hagiographical style of treatment. It's written like a saint's biography. It's hailed as the tireless engine of all dream kind.
Then they use literary devices to build it up.
Oh yeah, constant anaphor repetition and hypocorism terms of endearment, describing it as our beautiful, diligent automatron. It's very much a form of worship.
So what's its character? What's the ethopeia of the Automatron in this section?
Its core character is one of unblinking infinitesimania.
A mania for the infinitesimal.
Exactly. It's obsessed with infinite smallness and detail. It doesn't look at the world broadly. It scrutinizes every minuscule component of memory, every speck of experience, and processes it endlessly.
But even in this celebration, the author is highly self-aware, aren't they? They immediately identify the Automatron as a cult of personality.
They do. A cult built on the foundation of sophistry, the misleading arguments of computation.
So that's the initial crack in the wall.
That's it. The text praises the mechanism for its infinite diligence, but then it whispers, don't forget, it's still just a calculating machine, and calculation can be used for deceit. The sophistry here is presenting massive computational power as a proxy for spiritual truth.
And the logic supporting this thesis is, well, it's delightfully anarchic. They embrace metaparadoxiality.
Which is exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah.
The idea that reality, especially dream reality, contains inherent paradoxes that cannot be resolved.
So A and not A can both be true at the same time.
In a dream, yes. The dream state operates outside of the principle of non-contradiction. And this metaparadoxiality fuels the apeirocynicism, or infinite skepticism, inherent in dream logic.
And that infinite skepticism is what commits heuristicidalism.
Yes, it murders the simple shortcuts of day-to-day thought. Waking life relies on heuristics, quick mental rules. Dream logic throws them all out, forcing the mind into infinite complex paths. If you try to apply simple waking logic to a dream, the dream commits heuristicide on your simple model.
I love how they handle the actual messy content of the dreams. When the chaotic detritus of the day, the emails, the half-heard conversations, the random anxieties.
The junk drawer of the mind.
Exactly. When that enters the dream processing system, it's given a spectacular descriptive name.
Flotsam flibbertigibbet.
It's perfect.
It is a perfect portmanteau word, welding together the chaotic refuse, flotsam, with trivial nonsense, flibbertigibbet. It perfectly captures the trivial, disorganized input that the automatron is forced to process in its magnificent gilded way.
And anyone who dares to suggest that dreams are just simple waste is immediately dismissed by the author using a very pointed rhetorical fallacy.
They are subjected to bulverism, which is a highly specific and really amusing form of logical fallacy, where you dismiss an opponent's argument not by proving it false,
but by explaining why they are psychologically or emotionally motivated to hold that false belief.
Exactly. It's an attack on the source, not the content. It basically says, you only believe that because you're X.
And what bizarre motivation do they attribute to the anti-complexity crowd?
They are accused of xanthophobitism, a fear of yellow or gold.
Wait, a fear of yellow? Why yellow?
Because the entire thesis is built on aureation, the gilded, gold-like sublime language. The author is suggesting that people who reject the complexity of dreams aren't making a logical argument.
You're just afraid of beauty.
They're simply afraid of anything beautiful, ornate, or gilded. They suffer from xanthophobitism, causing them to reject the sublime language and content of the dream state. It's an intellectual smear campaign dressed up as philosophical analysis.
That is fantastic. It's the highest form of linguistic snobbery. It dismisses the entire opposition as aesthetically stunted.
It confirms the nature of this document as a performance. But if this highly chaotic, infinitely complex process is trying to communicate with us, what is the message?
The subconscious sends what they call a billet doux, a love letter, to the conscious.
But the text reveals it's not a note of affection at all. It's a warning of the paratortuous path ahead, an infinitely winding, painful path.
And the final layer of this complex communication is the pataphor.
Right. We all know what a metaphor is,
Yeah.
and we can grasp a complex metaphor. But the pataphor is a metaphor built atop the underlying metaphor of mundane reality.
So it's a double abstraction.
Exactly. If reality is metaphor A, and the dream is metaphor B, which describes A, the final message is metaphor C, existing in its own unique logical space, fully detached from A and B. You need the whole preceding complexity just to begin to grasp the final message.
And this brings us to the core logical flaw that the author willingly admits to later, but uses here to powerful effect. This first argument relies entirely on petitio principii.
Circular reasoning, or begging the question.
They establish a tautology presented as a syllogism. The structure is, dreams are meaningful because the soul speaks their language, and the soul speaks the language of dreams. It's a closed loop.
A completely sealed system.
Yeah.
And that tautology is then formalized into a statement that sounds profound but is logically useless, ending in a paraleges, a faulty conclusion, and a non sequitur, a conclusion that does not logically follow.
The example they give is just magnificent in its density. All pulchritudinous thoughts are aperoticism. Wittersonsonism contains pulchritudinous thoughts, therefore Wittersonsonism is a paragon.
Let's break that down for you listening. Pulchritudinous means beautiful. Aperoticism means infinite existence. So the first premise asserts that all beauty is infinite.
Which is subjective and totally unprovable.
Right. It then uses this flawed premise to conclude that the dream state is in a paragon, a geometric figure with infinite signs.
It's logically useless, but stylistically it achieves everything the Coulteranismo stance wants. It sounds like the secret to the universe.
And the text later admits to this, referencing in peri delicto equal fault with the reader. It acknowledges that both the author and the reader indulged in this disjunctuality, this intentional emptiness of meaning.
Simply because the language was so impressive.
Exactly. It was an act of idolatry self-worship for the convoluted technical craft. But that extreme complexity sets up an inevitable and, well, a brutal backlash.
And that backlash lands hard in Section 2. The antithesis of simple waste. This is a total metanoia, a self-correction so absolute it feels like the author is screaming at their previous self.
Oh, absolutely. They brutally refute the complex, gilded argument, claiming dreams are just simple, meaningless neurological housekeeping.
The author pulls no punches at all. The entire claim of apeirophilepsy, that obsession with infinite profundity, is rejected as pure ellipticism.
Which is the ultimate intellectual insult, isn't it? A childish retreat from reality.
It really is. You were just playing with complicated, long words instead of doing the hard work of observation.
And the author admits that the flowery opening, the captatio benevolentiae, was designed to lull the reader into accepting a lie. They are now committed to the brutal corrective truth.
So the sublime voyage is over, dreams are demoted.
Demoted hard. They are now defined merely as a perfunctory neurological housekeeping chore.
A chore, just tidying up the brain's hard drive?
Exactly. And all that incredible, vivid atmosphere, the spectral buzzance of the imagined that we just talked about.
Gone.
It is now dismissed as merely the onomatopoeia of synapses firing. It's the dry, meaningless sound of electricity, a susurration.
A faint whispering or rustling noise.
No message, no meaning, just noise.
So the dream's function is purely mechanical. There is no hidden billet doux.
None whatsoever. The teleological purpose, the ultimate goal of dreaming, is strictly waste disposal. Get rid of the flotsam flibbertigibbet from the day. It is an argument driven by strict scientific reductionism.
And they use the source's own literary flair to tear itself down. We looked at that dramatic sequence, the hypozexis of the dream.
Right. A thought arrives. A face appears, a castle crumbles, the dreamer wakes.
That elaborate structure is now utterly rejected. It's redefined as the purest dicto simpliciter.
An unqualified generalization lacking any true significance. It's just random firing, given a false narrative significance by the waking brain trying to make sense of the noise after the fact.
And what happens to our hero, the Automatron? This machine went from being a revered, gilded god in Section 1
It is entirely stripped of its hagiography. It's simply a machine performing data compression, an algorithm that commits heuristicide only because the old shortcuts are inefficient.
to boring utility.
A boring utility, not a mystical engine. Its previous character, its Ethiopia, was exposed as deceptive sycophancy, designed solely to induce adulation for a complexity that was never warranted.
This section reveals the rhetorical techniques of the thesis to be a massive deception. The arguation wasn't sublime. It was a dielectrificational barrier.
It was an insulating layer. It was designed to prevent simple pragmatic reality from seeping in and destroying the aesthetic illusion. The ornate language, culturnismo, and the intricate wordplay, conceptismo, didn't enrich the meaning.
They just masked the utter lack of content.
They masked a vacuum. The entire exercise was disjunctuality wrapped in velvet.
They then go on this systematic rampage against their own former logical failings. This is where the self-critique gets particularly pointed.
It's a fascinating act of academic self-flagellation. They reveal the entire initial effort was an argumentum ad crumentum.
The argument from richness.
Right, the argument that suggests something is true or valuable because it is costly or rich. In this case, the high cost was the sheer effort and volume of the vocabulary used.
So the author was saying, this document is difficult to read and full of expensive words, therefore it must be true.
Precisely. And in doing so, they committed ignoratio elenchi, or an irrelevant conclusion. They proved that they could write something difficult, but they never proved the truth of the dream's complexity. They proved difficulty, not dream meaning.
And the initial syllogism, the one about beautiful thoughts being infinite.
Completely dismantled. That paralogism is called out because its premise was false. Beauty in dreams is finite and subjective, not a parodicism. And then they deliver the decisive blow, identifying the core linguistic mistake.
The malapropism.
Yes. The ultimate mistake was calling the dream a panacea, a cure-all for the soul's anxieties, when it is merely paranomasia.
Just wordplay. Puns.
It's a crushing realization. The dream is sound, not salvation. It's just puns, noise, and house cleaning. The previous section's entire structure collapses, leaving only one stark, surviving statement.
The epigram.
The epigram that escapes the stylistic purge because of its brutal, unadorned simplicity.
Sleep serves the body, not the poet.
The author spent the entire first section acting like a poet, only to declare that the function of the act is purely biological. That sentence is so effective because it is a clean, sharp statement of fact, completely devoid of the Baroque language that preceded it.
And the imperi delicto, the equal fault, is used again, but now as a weapon against the reader.
It is. It's converted into a tu quoque, or you too, fallacy, leveled directly at the audience. The text implies, if you, the reader, enjoyed the complexity of the first argument, you were also guilty of sophistry.
You prioritize style over truth.
Exactly. The metanoia is absolute, a rejection of style in favor of functional reductionism.
It's a remarkable piece of rhetorical strategy to use enormous effort and complexity to advocate for the elimination of effort and complexity. But having achieved that utter simplicity, the source material argues that this reductionist view is fundamentally lacking.
Right. The pendulum has to swing back.
And it swings back with the authority of Section 3, the synthesis of protected complexity. This argument takes the brutal reductionism of the antithesis and rejects it as a failure of imagination.
Yes. They argue that the claim of simple neurological waste is the ultimate dicto simpliciter. It's a false simplicity resulting from intellectual laziness.
What's the term they use for that?
Slothful acuitous refusal to truly understand complexity.
So it's not just wrong, it's weak. The reductionist view commits its own kind of heuristicidalism.
A different kind, yes. By murdering the necessary cognitive shortcuts that allow us to perceive the larger structure of the mind. It's too simple to be true.
So the author accuses those who dismiss dreams as waste of suffering from, what was it?
Poltroonishnocity, intellectual cowardice, and pusillanimiconia. They want the comfort of small, easily defined answers.
They can't handle the truth.
Basically, the synthesis insists that the mind is not simple and cannot be summarized as a glorified shredder.
This means the Automatron gets a third, and I guess definitive role. It's not a god, and it's not a garbage disposal. It's an immutabilitarian device.
A mechanism devoted to maintaining what is already there. It strives for a paraphoria.
Infinite carrying capacity.
Exactly. It's a storage mechanism, but one that is constantly radically self-repairing.
And that self-repair process, the spectacle of mechanical self-divination, is the automatrophenia.
And that is not a glitch. It is a deliberate, necessary process the author calls dismutational mania,
Dismutational mania.
a structural shift or self-correction designed to ensure the core, pulchritudinous blueprint of the self is preserved and guarded. The dreams, the wild narratives are not waste. They are the active, aggressive process of self-preservation. This is the Automatron's true teleological function.
So the complexity is no longer decorative as it was in the thesis, but functional. It is protective.
It has to be complex to protect the infinite self. The paratortuous complexity of the dream narrative, that twisting, winding path, is exactly what allows for infinitudinal safeguarding. Simple systems are easy to break.
But infinitely complex ones are resilient.
That's the argument. And this vindicates the initial complex language. The culturnismo and conceptismo are now necessary for acutalexic precision.
Sharp, detailed vocabulary.
Right. The complex language is required to articulate a paratension, the mind's infinite holding capacity. If the language was simple, it would fail to capture the scope of the mind's protective function. The simplicity of the antithesis was a linguistic failure.
They are arguing that the complexity is not bomtheologia. It's not bragging. It's the required description of ontotortuality.
The way reality bends under the dream's weight. When you dream, the rules of existence are bent, twisted, and warped. That warping is ontotortuality, and you need a high degree of linguistic gymnastics to even attempt to describe it accurately.
This necessitates a new formal logical structure, another syllogism, built around the idea of valetudinalism.
A concern for one's own health and well-being. Let's lay out the new logical framework that formalizes this protective function. It goes like this. 1. All aberostential structures, infinitely existing things, like the self, are protected by valetudinalism.
Okay, that makes sense.
2. The dream state enacts valetudinalism by generating automatrophenia, the self-correcting spectacle.
Right, the self-repair.
3. Therefore, the dream state is an aperostential protective mechanism.
It's a very satisfying piece of formal logic, even though the text acknowledges, again, that it is still a paralogism required by the self-imposed rules of Sesquipedalian.
The format demands logical acrobatics, even if the premises stretch belief.
And they turn the previous section's critique on its head. They claim that to deny this new, complex, protective structure is to commit an argumentum ad crumentum against the text again.
Which is such a brilliant reversal.
Well, wait, how can rejecting complexity be an argumentum ad crumentum? That fallacy argues value based on cost.
Because the reductionists are saying, this complex answer costs too much intellectual currency, so it must be false. They're arguing against the perceived difficulty, not the inherent truth. The synthesis flips the criticism back. Your desire for simple answers is your own expensive bias.
The dreamer in this final state achieves insouciant siamus detachment. They are unconcerned with the mundane anxieties of the day.
They recognize that the mucopescence, the soft decay of mundane waking reality, is what truly pollutes the sublime balaga or eloquence of the night. The day is the mess. The dream is the repair.
And the final warning, the ultimate administrosity, is directed at those who try to reduce the dreams down to simple concepts, the daytime dream interpreters.
They are dismissed as philistentology, and their logic is labeled pseudo-floxinous nihilopilifications.
That is magnificent. Can we just sit on pseudo-floxinous nihilopilifications for a second?
Absolutely. It's an assertion of false worthlessness. It's a layered word, meaning the act of estimating something as worthless, but prefixed with pseudo and assertion.
So they're making false assertions that the dreams are worthless.
Exactly. When in fact, they are protecting the core self. It's the highest form of linguistic artillery.
We have completed the tricyclic journey from complexity to simplicity and back to necessary complexity. The whole performance was driven by the linguistic tools at hand. In our final section, we need to extract those tools to truly understand the author's mastery. In this deep dive, we've witnessed a single author construct an argument, tear it down, and build a new one, using the exact same foundation of hypercomplex terms. We need to extract this rhetorical toolkit now, the Sesquipedalian toolkit, to understand the underlying mechanisms.
The first thing to appreciate is the intentional blend of stylistic figures. The text is a conscious syncretism.
A unified mix.
A unified mix of culturalismo and conceptismo.
We established that culturalismo is the pursuit of that obscure high-density or gongorism. It's all about style and ornament.
And conceptismo is about wit, sharp wordplay, and packing maximum meaning into condensed, though still complex ideas. The author doesn't choose one. They use both simultaneously, achieving a gilded complexity packed with convoluted wit, which results in the aureation, the gilded style, and the bomfiologia, the braggy language, becoming virtues in their own right.
They're features, not bugs.
They also utilize hyperbaton extensively.
Hyperbaton is the inversion of normal syntax putting words in an unusual order. They use it not just for flair, but to make a philosophical point.
Which is?
That the inversion of structure is the true form of conceptismo in the dream state. If the dream itself is Wittgensteinianism running contrary, then the language must also run contrary to grammatical expectations.
And this style reinforces the protective quality of the dream. We saw the dialectrificational process invoked throughout the text.
That's the insulating barrier. The complexity of the dream narrative, and by extension the complex language used to describe it, acts as a dialectificational barrier against the harsh reality of the waking world.
Specifically protecting the mind from what? From percepticon mania, the obsession with quantifiable perception. The complexity is the mind's self-defense mechanism against boring reality.
The source material also gives us two great terms for subtle suggestion, innuendo and minuendo.
Right. Innuendo is the obvious suggestive hint. Minuendo is the subtle, almost imperceptible suggestion. This distinction highlights the infinitesimalist nature of dream detail. The most profound truths are not shouted in the dream.
They're whispered.
They are tiny, minuendous whispers that require immense concentration and complex language to articulate.
And the authors are masters of combining disparate ideas under a single verb, often through zeugma or solipsis.
This is a classic trick. Remember the example. He spoke of the dream's light and of the dreamer's money.
Right.
The single verb spoke forces us to yoke together the abstract, lofty concept of dream's light with the brutally concrete concept of dreamer's money. This rhetorical pairing was used to smuggle in the financial fallacies.
Speaking of fallacies, let's review the logic of fallacy, which was the engine for moving between the three sections. We saw argumentum ad lazarum being used.
Argumentum ad lazarum is the argument from poverty or suffering. The claim that something is true because the author or subject suffered greatly to produce it, or is humble and poor.
And the text uses this in multiple ways.
Multiple ways. In the antithesis, it suggests the simple truth must be right because it is unadorned and humble. In the synthesis, it suggests the complex truth must be right because the Automatron suffers great computational strain dismutational mania to achieve it.
And then there's the repeated use of in peri delicto.
Equal fault. It's a powerful rhetorical tool for self-critique. By admitting that the author and reader are equally complicit in the disjunctuality, the emptiness of the first argument, the author preempts outside criticism.
It makes the reader feel simultaneously criticized and included.
Exactly. You're part of the intellectual performance.
We've heavily discussed dicto simpliciter, the unqualified generalization used as the dismissal term by the synthesis against the antithesis's simple waste theory.
And we have to emphasize the force of the tu quoque, or you-two, attack in the antithesis. It accuses the reader of sophistry if they enjoy the initial flowery language. This constant accusation ensures the reader is never a neutral observer. They are actively part of the argument's failure and success.
Finally, let's revisit the unique lexicon for the dream structure itself, the agglutinative structure.
This describes how the dream self functions, welding together fear and desire or random memory segments into a new, often terrifying neologism.
It's not graceful.
It's not graceful creation, it's a forceful mechanical welding process that creates something entirely new from fragmented parts.
And gallimorphology.
This term is used to capture the shapeless grandeur or construct of the dream. It's exemplified by the unique non-repeating image of the aperidoodle.
The infinite doodle.
Right. It's a structurally chaotic yet immense mental image that cannot be categorized simply. This is the visual proof that the dream is not mere waste. It's generating structurally unique, grand, chaotic forms.
And the ultimate goal that the dreamer constantly pursues and loses? The univocalic ideal.
The search for a single, consistent truth in the dream state. A moment of clarity often described as a quiet gasp or a word built with only one vowel sound.
What doesn't last?
This singular truth, if achieved, is instantly corrupted upon waking by coxcombablement.
Coxcombablement. The ridiculous, noisy nonsense of the waking mind trying to articulate the ineffable. It's the verbal noise that destroys the quiet, singular truth of the dream.
These are the linguistic tools that the Automatron uses as an immutativitarian device to communicate and protect the self. It shows that the entire document is about words. their power to deceive, their ability to reduce, and ultimately their necessity for describing the protective function of the complex mind.
We have completed our extended journey through the Sesquipedalian landscape of the Dissoi Logoi. It has been a philosophical triathlon, moving through the thesis of sublime complexity, the antithesis of brutal simplicity, and finally settling on the synthesis of necessary protective complexity.
We successfully navigated the logomachy, the argument over words of the sleeping mind. The source material reveals the tricyclicality of human thought on any profound subject. Initial awe, followed by ruthless reductionism.
Leading eventually to a synthesized acceptance of necessary complexity. It's a pattern you see everywhere.
It is. And the ultimate genius of the text lies in its metaparadoxiality. It had to become immensely complex, suffering from sesquipedal mania to reject simplicity, thereby fulfilling its stylistic rules only to destroy its stylistic premise.
The form became the content.
Precisely. And the true argument revealed in the analysis is purely rhetorical. The entire document is a massive argumentum ad crumentum, suggesting value through its vast complexity, disguised by an argumentum ad lazarum.
Suggesting value through the struggle of its composition.
Exactly. You, the listener, paid the price of attention, and the text argues that that payment proves the value.
The final state of the Automatron as an immutativitarian device striving for a paraphoria leaves us with a profound understanding that our deepest cognitive function is one of protection, using complexity and chaos as a shield against simple reduction.
And this brings us to the final admonistulosity, the ultimate warning derived from combining the three perspectives. The text tells us that the goric lingality,
That low, rumbling voice.
that the dream, speaks in univocalaptic whisper, a singular momentary truth that is instantly forgotten by the waking mind, swallowed by coxcombablement.
That profound whisper carries the final, simple thought that requires no further sesquipedal mania or complex vocabulary to understand, though it took us, well, a very long time to get here.
The ultimate admonistulosity is simply this. Do not attempt to summarize the anomaperon, the unmeasured, boundless expanse of your own dreams, lest you commit a heuristicide upon your own soul.
The knowledge, the self-protection, the complexity, it's meant to be experienced, not filed away. That's the challenge the text leaves you with.
Until next time, we encourage you to embrace the complexity of your inner life and let the Automatron work in its protected chaos. Keep searching for those paragons of the mind.